Hello again, fellow podcaster, and welcome back to Pod Theory. I'm your host, Jason Cercone, and today, myself and our featured co-host for Season 2, Mr. Travis Brown, the founder of Poddex and podcaster extraordinaire, we're diving into one of the biggest myths and one of the biggest obstacles that I feel podcasters put in front of themselves when they're thinking about launching a show. And it's the fact that they think their podcast is going to suck if they don't spend a lot of money on equipment. Now, is it nice to have the greatest equipment in the world, and does it feel good to buy really nice things? Absolutely it does. But the fact is, you could start a podcast right now with $0 invested. Travis and I are going to talk about how you can do that, and we're going to talk about why this is such a misconception that people have when it comes to launching their podcast. So let's not waste another second. It is time for episode 132 of Pod Theory, debunking the myth that your podcast will suck if you don't spend a lot of money on equipment. Here we go.
No, we're good, dude. We're good. Let's bring it back. It's good. Episode 132. Act like you knew.
That's a great lead, and we're going to go with that. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to episode 132. That man on the rapping end of that microphone was Mr. Travis Brown, the Season 2 featured co-host.
I love it, man. I'm staying forever.
I'm going to be Michael Winslow sound effects going too.
I'm doing season 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. You're never going to get me to leave.
I will sell you the show. It's all yours, my friend. So let's talk.
You want to just trade podcasts?
Yeah. Is that is that like a permanent takeover of each other's show?
That sounds great.
I'm in. Well, I know we've got the equipment for it, and that is my horrible segue into today's subject on episode 132. Why do we feel that we are going to have a sucky podcast if we don't spend a ton of money on equipment? I know we've talked about this in the past on different episodes, Travis, and I know I've heard you talk about this on Instagram on your account at Poddex. You could literally start a podcast by using the voice notes app on your phone if you wanted to. And if you wanted to get a message out there, it doesn't come down to dropping thousands of dollars on podcasting equipment. Now, I see this as just another one of those barriers that people put up to say, well, I would start a podcast, but it's going to cost me way more money to get the equipment than I'm comfortable spending.
Yep.
Where in reality, I would take the opposite approach of, well, I want to start a podcast. I'm going to get some equipment that is got some good recommendations. People seem to be using it and doing well with it. It's not going to break the bank. If I truly enjoy this medium and I love podcasting and I want to continue to create content, then I'll do a little bit more on the investment side. What say you, Travis?
I think that expensive gear is something that people put up as an excuse. Like, if I just had this piece of gear, I'd be, able to do what I wanted to do. It's sort of that if I just get that one last little thing, I'll be able to do what I want to do. And I think it's more of a mindset thing. I think people want to, they see other people have the best gear and they want to, not be left out. But I think for the most part, I think it comes down to it's an easy excuse for people to be able to not have to do it by putting this thing in the way. It's like, if I would get in shape if I just had a gym membership. You know what I'm saying?
Right. We talked about this before. I think we have this tendency in general as humans to create excuses and point the blame in another direction and not take it upon ourselves. So if you're letting price stand in the way of starting a podcast or improving your podcast, let's put that myth to bed today.
Yep.
So let's start at the very bottom, because we know you could start a podcast for $0. How would you do that, Travis? If you had no money, but you wanted to start a podcast, how would you go about it?
I love it. Well, I've got a phone that has more computing power than the Apollo 11 space mission. So, this microphone in this phone has been developed over, 20 iterations of the iPhone, and you can get a lot of really great sound out of it. So there's not really an excuse for not having a microphone. And then I would just use a free host, like Sounder FM has a free platform, and I have no excuses. All I have to do is record, and I put it onto my host, and I broadcast it to the world. Does it look as cool as this microphone? No. Does it sound as good as this microphone? Not exactly, but it does the job because the message that I have to send is more valuable than any microphone that I could ever use. If you had, let's say you've got a budget of $100, do you think that's fair, or should we make it like
Let's start,
50?
well, we're going to go in progression here. So we
Okay.
started with zero. Let's say you're up to $100 now that you want to invest. What are you going to do with that?
Oh, me personally, I was asking you, what would you do with $100?
Oh, with $100, I would probably look at a microphone that I could plug into my computer, USB, where I don't have to worry about getting some sort of mixing board or an audio interface, something that plugs in like a Blue Yeti. I've never personally used one of those, but I know they're very reputable. A lot of people that start podcasts use those because it allows them to amplify their voice. They sound good. They sound better than what they would sound like on their internal microphone on their phone. And it's a good way to get started. As I said, you really want to make sure that this is going to be a medium that you're going to enjoy, that you're going to continue to consistently create content with. It's one of those things when I see people pod fade, it's one of the first questions I ask internally. I usually don't ask this outright, but how much money did they spend on their equipment? And after 7 episodes, they're walking away, or after 5 episodes, they're throwing in the towel. And that sucks.
Well, there is a psychology behind it. Feels good to buy things.
Very
Feels
true.
good to buy things. So
Very true.
if you're one of those people who's like, I want to start a podcast, well, I gotta get a microphone, so I better buy that first. And then you feel as if you've taken a step towards that goal. And then the microphone arrives and you're gonna get anxious because like I don't really know anything about microphones, it's technology, and then well, I'll wait to plug it in, and then you wait till the very last second before you're going to interview someone and plug it in. You have all these problems because you just didn't plug it in and mess with it a little bit. So I think it's an external thing that keeps people from potentially creating. You can make a feature film on your phone,
Yeah.
but most people think they need the 4K red camera that is going to allow them to do all that stuff. If I had $100, I'd buy a $50 USB mic and a $50 pair of headphones. Again, using a free podcast host, not Anchor FM, but Sounder FM, and I'd start broadcasting. And that way, the question that I'm gonna go a little off topic here, not off topic, but off of the budgetary. The question that I have for people is they say, I really want to start a podcast. I really think this could be a career. I really think this could help my business. I really think it could do this, 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 and this. And it can. But then when it comes time to investing in themselves, they'll spend $100,000 on a piece of paper from a college that guarantees them no success. Yes, maybe it looks good on a resume, or maybe it'll get you a job opportunity, but they won't spend $100 on a microphone and a pair of headphones. So it's like, what it really comes down to is, do you not think it's going to work, and that's why you don't want to spend the money, or do you not believe in yourself enough so you don't want to invest the money? But podcasting, I sounded like Christopher Walken. Podcasting, uh, essentially is a tool or a business. It's either a tool to market yourself and let people get to know you, or you can turn it into an actual business and make money. And if you were going to tell me you're going to open a restaurant, but you didn't want to buy an oven,
Right.
or any plates,
Right.
I would say, well, then you don't really want to start a restaurant, because that's what you're going to need in order to do that. So you really have to think to yourself, and I love your thought process, Jason, because you're thinking, set yourself up to, in case this isn't you don't know if you're going to love podcasting. So the real test is, if you want to be responsible or frugal, start with your phone. You already own your phone or rent your phone from Verizon. You have the voice notes recorder on anything, Android, whatever phone you have, except for the flip phones, you're pretty much good to go. Start talking into it and recording it and listening to it, and see if it gives you goosebumps, see if it excites you.
Yeah.
And then decide, am I willing to invest in myself? Because the cost of a course on podcasting will cost you 3 times as much as the actual gear you need to start a podcast.
I think we all have to be very aware of the fact that the cost of your equipment isn't going to make you fall in love with podcasting, and it's not going to make you good at podcasting. What's going to make you good at podcasting, and maybe even make you fall in love with it, is doing the reps, doing it every day, doing it maybe not every day. Maybe if you want to do it every day, you're more than welcome to. But if you spend $2,000 on equipment because you think I've got to sound so goddamn good when I go live for the first time, that you forget the fundamentals of speaking on a microphone, or even learning those basic fundamentals of how to conduct an interview, how to adhere to the 80-20 rule with your guest. All of these things that can make you a better podcaster have nothing to do with the price of your equipment. So if you get into it after dropping, let's say you drop $2,000 on every possible gadget that you could find to make you the best sounding podcaster in the world, at the end of the day, you just threw $2,000 away because you didn't take the time to develop the skill set that's free, that you can gain from practice, that you could gain from just calling up a friend or a significant other or a family member and say, listen, I want to start a podcast. Would you be willing to join me on Zoom for 15 minutes? I want to do an interview with you. I'm going to ask you some questions. I want to build some model of a skill set that I could then carry over to my podcast. And I want you to answer the questions as if we were strangers, as if we had just met to do this podcast. Something like that versus saying, well, this piece of equipment's $2,000, but I got to have it. It's going to get you so much further because it's going to carry you further in everything that you do. So focus on the reps, not on the amount you're dropping on your equipment.
Yeah, we've all heard of buyer's remorse, right? Like, I do think that buying expensive equipment, and I'm going to make a point why you should in a minute, but buying expensive equipment automatically puts a lot more pressure on you to succeed. You're like, well, I spent all this money on gear. Now I got to make it work. And then you've put this imaginary pressure on yourself that because of this external object that your podcast has to succeed. So I could see where that would cause some internal issues from a creator philosophy standpoint. Now, the alternative to that is there's some really great tools out there. You know, Jason's using a mic right now that costs around $250. You know, and you may say, wow, $250 for a microphone. But some of these products like the Shure MV7 and the Rodecaster Pro have some things built into it that do some of the heavy lifting that's going to help you save time on the back end. So let's say you said, hey, you know what? I don't want to spend a bunch of money. I don't want a bunch of pressure. And you buy that $50 USB mic. Well, you're going to have to do more work on the back end while you're processing your podcast, as opposed to if you bought the $250 mic, it's got what's called DSP or digital signal processing built in to where it's automatically going to make you sound good out of the box. And so you don't have to worry about that back end. I like to call it knob fiddling, tweaking your podcast to death, pulling your hair out, because you're not an audio engineer. Right. And so there's two ways to look at it. You're investing in saving yourself time, or you're not investing and you're going to be willing to do the work on the back end. And I think it just comes down to two things: your belief in yourself and your budget and what you're willing to invest. Because if you want to be Joe Rogan and get a $110 million contract, you know, you got to have the goods, which is the talk. You got to talk the talk. And at some point you have to at least have some semblance of the quality. So I think it's sort of a spectrum that you walk along. But the best way to figure out if podcasting is for you is to just completely start for free. And you take out your phone and you will sound great, because the phone has been engineered to make you sound great on the phone. And you can get apps like the Shure Motive app that records high quality recordings that will make you sound good. And if you've got the thunder, if you've got the goods, if you bring the value, if you tell great stories, it doesn't matter. The last episode, I picked on Gary Vaynerchuk. His podcast sounds terrible. Terrible. He uses Apple earbuds, but you know what? His message is fire and he gets you all amped up. So it really doesn't make or break a podcaster. It's more of a vanity thing. Like, I have the best podcast microphone, or maybe it instills confidence. I don't know. What do you think? Does better equipment instill confidence in a podcaster?
I think to some degree it can. I think when you hear yourself, and that's another thing, I know some people won't go back and listen to their productions because they say they don't want to hear their own voice. I don't believe in that at all. I go back and listen to everything that I put out there because I want to hear how I sound.
Yeah.
I want to get better. And if you do sound clearer, more crisp, then I think there is something that can instill a little bit more confidence, absolutely. But again, it's not the most important thing. You had made this reference to Gary Vee on a few episodes back in season 2 that he's doing little quick videos in his car and they don't sound great, and you got New York traffic and all of the sounds of the big city in that recording as well. But we're not focusing on that because he's delivering a message in that 1 minute clip or whatever they put out there that we want to hear. We know it's going to make us better. It's going to make us feel better. It's going to give us an idea. It's going to spark some inspiration. You had also made the comment if somebody were to come to you that said, I have the meaning of life in this little 3 minute clip, but there was all kinds of static. You're going to go out of your way to push the static to the side so you can hear that message as clear as you want. So the point being, quality is great. And of course, you want to think about your listener experience and give them the best audio quality you can, but you can achieve that without breaking the bank and also giving them the content that they want to hear. Now, to speak to that and almost squash my point, if you're doing garbage quality in regards to your audio over and over and over every episode to where you're not mic'd properly, and one episode you're so loud that you're blowing earbuds out of people's ears, to the next episode where you're hardly coming through. And there's all of this disparity between how you sound on one show to the next. That's not going to keep a person engaged with your show. So you want to make sure that the approach you take is consistent, just like everything else we're talking about. But I think the, again, overarching theme of what we're talking about on this episode is that doing that doesn't cost thousands of dollars. If you get to a point where your podcast is driving traffic to your website, if you're trying to grow your brand, or you're getting thousands and thousands of listeners and you feel now is the time to step up, you can still do it without breaking the bank. I'm sitting here with my Shure MV7. I love this microphone. You mentioned it. It was $250. The funny thing is, I have this mic because Travis put a carousel on Instagram with some different equipment suggestions, and I just happened to be in the market for a new microphone at that point. And the two that he suggested were the MV7 and the Rode Pod mic, which was $99. I felt, well, if Travis is suggesting this, I'm going to go for the Rode Pod mic because it's cheaper. If it's good, what difference does it make? And I'm not saying that mic is bad at all, because Travis, you know this firsthand because you're the one that helped me test this. I just got a defective microphone.
Yeah.
We did everything we possibly could, and I just sounded like I was inside a tin can. It was not a question of that mic being bad. It was just a question of that specific mic.
You got a dud.
I got a dud. I sent it back and said, the hell with it. I'm going to go all in on the Shure because that is the one that everybody's always talking about. I'm doing it. And I spent a little extra money, and I could not be happier with my decision. But that's not to say that you go out and spend $99 on a Rode Pod mic and don't have great success with it. The point is that you're not breaking the bank with what you do, and you don't need to do that. So if you have that mentality now, squash it. Put it on the back burner. Don't think that that's what it's going to take to start a good podcast, or to maintain a good podcast, or to improve upon an existing podcast.
I agree. I think that's very well said. I think you could start a podcast for $0 right now without any ordering on Amazon. And you could also spend some good money on something and set yourself up if you think that that's going to be an outlet for you. And I think that when you really break it down, I'm an audio engineer, so I'll just break this down for you. Microphones all do the exact same thing. Air comes out of your vocal cords, out of your mouth, and the microphone has an element that captures that through physics, okay? You've probably heard the term proximity effect. The closer I get to this microphone, the bigger my voice sounds. The farther I get away, the more I sound smaller and you hear more of the room. But they all do the same thing. So there's not a one size fits all for the best podcast mic. They can sound a little different, but they all do essentially the same thing, is they capture your voice. And the podcast is your voice. And that's why it's such a great medium, is because you don't have to set up a video camera and you don't have to do all this stuff. You simply record your voice. And so if you're putting gear in front of you starting, you're wasting time. And if you're really thinking that podcasting is something that you really want to do and do the best you can, make a small investment in yourself. You don't have to build a rocket ship to go to Mars for this thing. You get a decent microphone, and the microphone I'm using is supposedly the top microphone, and it costs $400. When I think of my dreams, if I was like, hey man, I want you to invest in your dreams. What are you willing to invest? $400? You'd be like, yeah, of course. $400? Yes. It's not $50,000. So you have to put these things into perspective. There's a spectrum. Do you want to test out podcasting? Then go to the lower end to start. Do you want to invest in yourself? Then get some gear that's going to help you make a better podcast easier. But in the end, these are just tools. A screwdriver is a screwdriver is a screwdriver. Hand me a Phillips head screwdriver. I don't look at the brand and go, well, this is a Craftsman. I can't use this. That's the basis of what we're talking about here. But don't let external things stop you from doing something or experimenting with a medium that can help you grow your presence, share your message, and is the easiest medium out of all of them. I'd rather sit on a knife than write a blog post. I like video, but it's very time consuming. It's a lot harder to look into the camera and say the right thing. But podcasting, I just get to sit here and no one sees me, and I can talk and I can stop and I can edit it. And it's one of the easiest mediums that you could ever use. And it's your real voice. It's your voice. It's your essence coming through the speakers and getting somebody excited. So it doesn't matter what this is. It matters where your brain's at, where your head's at, and your limiting beliefs. And if I just had this, I could do that. If I just had a celebrity guest, I would blow up. If I just had the right mic, I would blow up. False. It's if you just put in the work and give a lot of value, it doesn't matter. I mean, I guess it does matter if you use a tin can and a string, but you get where I'm going with this.
No, absolutely. I think it speaks again to the whole premise of this episode is the fact that if you're thinking that money is going to be the barrier, it's not. If that's what you've built up in your mind, then you need to overcome a lot more than just having spent $100 on a microphone. Like, I think there's more to the block that you're putting in front of yourself for starting a podcast or building upon an existing podcast. So I will throw this out there too as we wrap up. And I'm saying this in a kind of an abbreviated way because I don't believe this would be available everywhere, depending on where you're listening to this podcast. But here in Pittsburgh, where I'm based, there is a place where you can go. It's an actual studio, and you can rent time to record podcasts. They actually have it set up where you can come in and do video. You can do all kinds of things, and it's very cost effective. And before you go spending money on equipment that, again, if you're not going to really get serious about podcasting, no matter what you spend, it's just going to sit there and collect dust. If this is something that's available in your area, take time to check that out. Grab a friend. We're going to go do a quick podcast, and especially if you're going to be doing a show with a co-host. Let's go rent the space for half an hour, and let's just do a mock show, and they have all the equipment for you.
Yep.
And you can find out before you even spend a dime on equipment that you don't know will get a lot of mileage. So again, that's not available everywhere, but if it's something that is, take advantage of that. It's a good way to see if this is something that you would really want to do, or if it's just like a little itch that you need to scratch and say, maybe this isn't for me.
Yeah, you don't buy a car without driving it for the most part.
Yeah, there you go. So if it's available, take a test drive on the mic and see how it goes.
The other thing that I want to leave you with is that we've mentioned how many people quit podcasting. Go on Facebook Marketplace and look for the person who's unloading their microphone because they've quit, and get a deal on a product that is lightly used. There's affordable ways to be able to get the things you need. And speaking of test driving, there's guitar centers all over the country that have microphone displays where you can go talk into a microphone and listen to it on headphones and see what you think sounds best on your voice. It's subjective. Audio is subjective. So what I think sounds good, you might not think sounds good, and vice versa. So just set yourself up to know that the microphone is not your barrier. Your mindset is your barrier if you're thinking about starting or thinking that there's some magical thing that's going to be the silver bullet that's going to take you to the next level. It's inside of you. It's not outside of you.
I know I've spoken on past episodes of Pod Theory back in season 1 about not purchasing used equipment because you don't know what you're getting. You know, if it's somebody that's trustworthy, then you want to roll those dice, go for it. Personally, I don't believe in that just because it could be something that they're dumping it because it doesn't sound good. Maybe I can recoup a little bit of my money and then someone else will be stuck with it. I don't know. That could happen, but give it a roll if you feel it makes sense. You know, someone's dropping a microphone for $1. Spend $1. You know, like see,
I'll take 100.
Yeah, right. But again, like Travis just said, it's all about your mindset. It's not so much about the equipment that you have in front of you. As you grow and you want to make those investments in yourself, go for it, but don't let it stop you from getting the ball rolling. I think that's a good way to wrap up this episode. What do you think, Travis?
I think the myth has been debunked.
Yes, sir. Well, speaking of myths that we need to debunk, how about episode 133? My podcast has been live for like a month. Why the hell aren't I famous yet?
I love
We're
it.
going to get into that as we dive into episode 133. So once you hear this episode wrap, run over and listen to 133. I'm Jason. He's Travis. Thanks for listening. All right, and that officially brings down the curtain on episode 132 of Pod Theory Season 2. I hope you learned today that you don't need to break the bank when it comes to getting the equipment you need to start a podcast. I know I talked about this back in Season 1 as well. I feel that the conversation that Travis and I had today really elaborated on that point. Spend the money that you want to spend, but don't let thousands of dollars stand in the way of producing great content. As I said during our conversation, I feel there's more value in putting in the reps and putting in the work and getting better at your craft. You could do that with a very inexpensive microphone. As long as you're focusing on getting a little bit better at podcasting each and every time you hit the record button, you're going to be in a much better space. So keep that in mind as you press forward with building your podcast. So we're moving on to episode 133, and I invite you to move right along with us because that episode is ready and waiting. And on episode 133, we're going to debunk another myth. And that's the myth that my podcast has been live for a month. Why aren't I famous yet? In case you haven't picked up the theme of this season, a lot of this has to do with setting realistic expectations, and we're going to apply that philosophy to the fact that you're not going to get famous as your podcast initially goes live. So episode 133 is a good one. I highly recommend it. Would you expect me to say anything else? Of course not. 133 is waiting. Jump over and I will see you there. My name is Jason Cercone and I am signing off of episode 132. End of podcast. Being a guest on podcasts that are relevant to your message and mission is the most powerful way to build your brand today. With each guest appearance you make, you build your reputation, establish trust, position yourself as a thought leader, grow your audience, and much, much more. If you'd like to enhance your brand by maximizing the power of podcasting, you need to check out Guest Spotter. Guest Spotter offers comprehensive communications and guest booking solutions, so all you need to do is show up and dominate your interview. Visit guestspotter.com today to learn more.